Well, I'd like to say initially the story of the living Indus is something that began, in a sense, it's been something that's been considered in Pakistan for a long, long time. The Indus River is the backbone of much of what we do and recognized as essential to the future of Pakistan. But more prosaically, if we start with where this particular process began, it began from the United Nations point of view with the call that the Secretary General made a few years ago when he spoke of the triple planetary crisis, the crisis of climate change, the crisis of biodiversity loss, and the crisis of pollution. And he tasked the United Nations representatives through the resident coordinator who is with us today in every country to begin a discussion with the government of the countries, the member states of the United Nations, as to what they considered the ecosystem, the greatest negative impact of climate on the fabric of survival for the country. Now, when the discussion began with the government of Pakistan at that point, the minister at the time, who was from the Ministry of Climate Change, said, look, for us, the survival of Pakistan and the ecosystem that is going to be the most impacted is the Indus Basin. And that's a fairly self-evident issue. It's the backbone, as people have said before, of what Pakistan is today, and you saw it in the film. And then the minister said, and within that ecosystem, the most important resource is water. Water is what Pakistan depends on for its survival, as do most countries. And the source of that water, which is the monsoons, the precipitation, and the glacial melt, determines the economy and the future and the prosperity of the country. So if we are looking at what is the most important consideration for Pakistan's survival, and you heard this in what the resident coordinator, Mohammad Yahya, said earlier, you heard it amplified greatly in what the current minister, Rumina, said. We need to focus on the source of the sustenance of Pakistan, which is water. Is there a problem? Yes. Okay, fine, thank you. And so began the discussion as what do we do? The scope is enormous. The future of the Indus determines what will happen in Pakistan and whether it will survive in its current form. And you having a problem with the mic? Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me better? What shall I use, this or this? Okay. And so essentially what we're looking at is a program for restoration. And you heard also a little earlier that the past is not going to be the future for Pakistan, and specifically not when we look at the change that is occurring with the two great systems that impact the future of the river. It's the monsoons and it's the glacial melt. And those systems which have been stable and which allowed for the current irrigation system of Pakistan to be put into place are no longer predictable. I mean, all of us have seen it. The floods come, the droughts come, and they come because we no longer know what the temperature is going to do to the ice in the mountains or what it's going to do to the hydrodynamic systems of weather. Which is why today we live in an extremely unpredictable situation, and which is why we have to plan within the context of unpredictability, which basically means that the program that we're talking about for the Living Indus now is Pakistan's adaptation plan for the future. How do we adapt to forces over which we have no control, which we contribute very little to, but which will fundamentally impact what happens to us as a country in the next 40, 50 years.